It's 5:30. We call the meeting of the Town Center CRA Advisory Committee to order. Do we need a roll call?
I have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The first item of business is approval of the minutes from our July 18, 2018 meeting. A copy of the minutes were sent out with the meeting notice announcement. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? All right, so we have a motion from Ms. Morrell. Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second from Mr. Foreman. Do we have any discussion, additions or deletions to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. The next item of business is old business. This is discussion of desired changes to the CRA plan. Mr. Schmidt has provided us an updated copy of the CRA plan. Looking through it, it appears that it includes a lot of the red line changes, includes changes that were previously approved and voted on at our last meeting. There are some additional changes that have been added. First one being on page 28 of the document. In the bottom of page, bottom right-hand column on page 28 under land use regulations, there's some language that has been added. Efforts should be made to increase code enforcement efforts within the CRA with respect to cars parked on the right-of-way, over our sidewalks. And I know we had addressed that in our previous minutes. Okay, so we asked that we, at our last meeting, we'd asked that, and said it would be a good idea to address additional code enforcement concerns within the plan. And so we have language adding that. It's following our protocol in the past. Has everyone had a chance to read the addition recommended for additional code enforcement on page 28? And do we have, is there a motion to approve this additional amendment to the plan?
Motion.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Woodard and a second by Ms. Morrell. Is there any discussion or additions, deletions to this proposed language?
I see a typo on the word conditions. That's the only, I don't know what line down.
I guess the question I would have is, Steve, reminded us that these types of things come with a cost, and that if it's not fed into the budget to do, then it's probably not going to get done. So I don't know how relevant this kind of change would be to the budgeting process of the city. I think they're probably somewhat far along on that process at this point.
Unlike many code enforcement issues, it can be almost seasonal. Obviously, in the summertime, we have a lot of pressure to enforce beach vendors, parking, that sort of thing. So, this we could probably, with our existing, you know, it's all a matter of focus. You basically get results on what you focus on. And during the off-season, outside the 100 days of summer, we don't have quite as much demand for regulating beach vendors, and we'll probably be able to reduce some of our regulation for parking, especially in parking lots without paying and that sort of thing, and can probably just sort of redirect some of that time and attention to specifically addressing issues within the CRA. Especially addressing, you know, the obvious, the low-hanging fruit, people parking in the right of way, parking across the sidewalk. One of the things that you mentioned in your minutes, it basically said something about parking on lawns. We don't really have a regulation that makes that a violation, so you can't enforce something that's not a violation. However, we do have an ordinance that limits the number of cars, boats, and trailers, and that sort of thing that you can have parked in front. So, you know, we can go in and make a concerted effort on a regular basis without having to spend a whole lot of time at it during the off season to try to address some of these issues. And the thing about code enforcement is once it's like, you know, training people that they're gonna get a ticket if they don't pay to park. They only need one ticket before they start figuring out they pay to park. And so this is kind of a similar situation. Once you start giving people NOVs and taking them to the magistrate for parking on sidewalks, parking in the right of way, you know, word gets around, these people that live here, you know, you get them doing the right thing, and typically they continue doing the right thing, or they continue doing the wrong thing. Either way, you basically are starting to manage that problem.
So as far as the budget impact, what I'm hearing is that it would not have a significant budget impact because it would just be a season in the normal course of the year, possibly sweep through the area and try to.
This is not a huge job. It's a matter of just allocating resources appropriately and in a timely manner.
Mr. Foreman, does that answer your?
That answers my question.
Any other comments regarding this provision? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting this amendment?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passed unanimously.
With the correction of the title.
Correct. All right, the next going in the wrong way.
Kingston 2, will be next.
Yes. Okay, so if you'll flip to page 32 of the document, we have an update to the Community Redevelopment Area Tax Differential Analysis table. This is the dollars. Do we have a motion to adopt the updated table?
Probably help it'd probably help if I explain what.
Let's get a motion to.
Oh, yeah.
So do we have a motion to? Mr. Foreman moves to adopt the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Morrell seconds the motion. Now we can have discussion on the table. And Mr. Foreman, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just want to understand the table, or make sure that I understand it. As you go across the different categories, you get to the available revenue, and if I'm reading this correctly, in year 2026. It'd be the first time that we see any revenue available to the town center.
Well, and actually, it's a little worse than that, but let me try to explain to you what each one of these columns are.
Okay.
And what this is. And, you know, obviously, you get past 2018, it's a projection, and I added the little parentheses with a P in it. It's kind of hard for you to read, I'm sure. But that was just to let it, you know, kind of identify this as a projection. But 2018 is an actual, 2015, 2000 is an actual, and I cut out a lot. I mean, rather than having a long one that showed every year, although that can be helpful in terms of showing you what's transpired. I kind of picked some, and we can add that back in, but I picked some years that would basically lend themselves to milestones, if you will. The very first year, 1998, is extremely important because that sets the annual base. That sets the base for the TIF revenue. So basically, the TIF, which is a tax increment funding, is the difference in the current revenues over that base. And that base is set at $94,996 or $94,996,840 as an annual tax base revenue. Actually, that's not right. Yeah, it is. The next column over, increment above the base year. Obviously, in 1998, there was no increment above the base year because that's the year that set the base. But by 2000, we actually had an increment of the tax roll had gone up $7,394,301 in the town center CRA above that 1998 base. And so that just shows the increment, which pretty much is, at least for these years, has increased every year. In some past years, it had gone down, but in 2000, it had increased a little over 7 million, and by 2015, it increased over 118 million, and in 2018, it increased 153 million. From there, the projections are based on a 5% annual increase. I will tell you that in 2018, we saw a 7.37% increase. Can't count on it continuing at that rate necessarily, but 5% is a fairly conservative, probably actually a realistic estimate of the underlying, you know, increase over a long time. You know, it's obviously it fluctuates annually, but that's you know, it's a general estimate of the underlying increase in the tax base over time. The revenue on the increment basically is the difference in revenue between the incremental tax base less the base rate. And then available revenue is basically what's available after paying any debt service. So there's some bonds that have been taken out, and that's what's available after paying the debt service on the bonds. The cumulative revenue basically is over the years. This is cumulatively what's happened. Because there was a downturn in the economy, you'll see that in 2015 and 2018, and you know, we were extremely negative. We borrowed money. We were losing money. We were in the red on an annual basis because the debt service on the bonds was higher than our available funds, the tax revenue. So we kept going negative every year, and we're still somewhat negative. The one of the reasons I included 2021 in here is based on the 5% projections. That's the first year that we're probably going to see net funds available after debt service. It's not a lot. It's 52,000. Let's see, it's $52,906. So, again, it's not a lot of money, but it's available funds after the debt service, and then,
Can I have a question on that?
shoot.
And did I hear you say that that is also paying back the debt service to the general fund?
Yeah, and that's where it's the cumulative revenue, while in 2021, and there's like 52,906 available after debt service, we're still 2.3 million, over 2.3 million in the red in what the CRA actually owes the city's general fund, because in the past, the city had basically funded that shortfall, and they funded it, they will have funded it according to this projection in 2021 to the tune of $2.3 million. That's actually the high point in terms of that overage, or the year before would have been the high point, but that's very close to the high point of, and obviously when you start getting in the black in your available revenue, you can start to pay that back. And since that available revenue is projected to increase, then it starts paying it back at an accelerated rate. According to the pro forma that we have with this 5% annual increase in the growth of the base rate after the beginning in 2019, it would appear that we will pay back the general fund in 2027. And so that's when we actually break even and start seeing some revenue to spend outside of what's owed in debt service.
Problem with that. And the problem basically is that the CRE funding, the town center CRE funding is basically funding large projects such as Airport Road, Main Street, and everything else that would normally, under any of the circumstances, be provided for by the city. And, and certainly to hold the CRA itself hostage without having any funding, is the city going to spend any funding on the town center?
The city does spend some funding on the town center, not a lot, because but because honestly, the city does it outside of grants. The city doesn't have a lot of money to spend.
There are no capital projects in the town center. The completion of the crosstown connector actually touches both the town center and the harbor CRA.
Put a toll booth there?
Pardon?
They could put a CRA toll booth there.
Yeah.
And the city has spent already, just in acquisition of rights of way, over $4.7 million on that project.
Yeah, well, see, they're taking money out of this pocket and putting it in this pocket. And basically, the funding that comes with the crosstown connector comes from multiple sources. And it's not part of a CRA plan as such. So, I don't know, it doesn't do me any good to say this except to get it off my chest, is that I feel it's basically unfair to hold the CRA, the town center, hostage to a plan that benefits the whole city. And then not to have any funding for the plan in the process. Even if they went back and they adjusted it so that you would have at least some method of funding projects for the city town center that we could recommend to the city and serve a purpose. But as it stands, we can read this all day.
And review it
And
every
it doesn't go
year
anywhere.
for no purpose, what appears to be no purpose.
Anyway, I've said it and I'm not going to say anymore.
Do we have any other comments on the table?
can we chat a little bit about what he was just saying? We're still talking funds here, so it's kind of on the table, or we can go move on to something else and then talk about it.
Well, I think I don't know what that's going to do to change the table.
It's not.
It's not.
So I think there's a discussion to be had about available funding,
Yes.
but I don't think that's a function of whether or not we're going to approve inclusion of this table, which is just stating the facts, or not facts,
Yeah.
stating the projected revenue that is anticipated to come in, and the fact that since the CRA had borrowed, it had incurred debt, and that debt has been picked up by the general fund, that the CRA is obligated to repay that debt to the general fund.
And my question is why?
Under the current structure of the CRA plan.
Okay.
So I think the first discussion is this, do we think this table is accurate and
Yes.
updated, and should we adopt that as part of the plan? So I will ask for the vote. All those in favor of including the plan, including the table for the tax differential analysis on page 32, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, inclusion of the table passes unanimously.
Yeah, I will make that change, but I will just point out that in 2021, under available revenue, there's a serious typo there. It should actually be a positive 52,906, and I'll make that change.
Good.
Positive 52 on available revenue, did you
Yes,
say?
the available revenue after debt service is actually 52,906, projected to be 52,906 in 2021, and for some reason that didn't get saved right. But I've got it noted, and I'll make that change.
And we have an issue on revenue, but let's go through, let's finish up the changes that have been proposed first, and then we can address revenue discussion. The next set of changes is on page 33. This is amendments to the language dealing with the SBA as a potential funding mechanism to help provide capital for businesses to do renovations and spruce up. We would like to thank Mr. Woodard for supplying this information to Mr. Schmidt. Is that, I believe?
Yes,
So,
there was some errors in the language that he provided me information to clear up.
Yeah, and it changes periodically too, so it may be out of date next year.
okay. So we have language talking about the programs, and it's and again, thanks, Mr. Woodard, it is current. So is there a motion to include these changes to the SBA Small Business Administration language? Is there a motion to approve this amendment?
Motion.
Okay, do we have motion by Mr. Woodard, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Sandsted seconded. Is there any discussion on this language? Any recommendations for additions or deletions to it?
No.
I think we can trust the banker. That's the first time I've ever said that. All right, so all those in favor of approving this amendment to the SBA language on page 33 of the CRA plan? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And I think that does it for current language. So Then I think we have I heard a discussion about general funding of projects, and I guess, some of the conditions we identified as blight in the original CRA plan were transportation, drainage, and connectivity. And the city designed improvements to two of the major roads, I guess technically three, so you have Legion Drive, Airport, and Main Street. And there were drainage projects, road improvement projects that were developed, and the funding mechanism, because those roads were located in the CRA, was the tax increment financing. And yes, they benefited areas beyond the CRA boundary. But I think that's a short synopsis of how we got into this. You asked, Mr. Foreman, you asked the question, how did we fund citywide projects with CRA dollars?
Tax the poor to pay the rich.
I don't think we objected to it at the time. We thought it was a good idea. But the fact is, in reflection on that, is that we never envisioned, there was no warnings there that at future dates you would not be replenishing the funds to the town center so that those other improvements that we didn't get to would be getting done. And so that's my heartburn, is who owns that? Does just the town center own it, or does the whole city own it? And I think, frankly, in this case, there would be some thought about restructuring that payback so that it would enable your town center to do some things that it should be doing. That's all. That's probably on a wish list somewhere. But
Well, and if it hadn't been for, quite honestly, that would probably never have gotten paid back if it hadn't been for us extending the term of the CRA another 10 years.
yeah, the argument at the time was that those projects were increasing in cost every year,
Right.
and that it needed to be done up front and not later. And it was.
There was a decrease in the growth rate of the annual tax base for the CRA in
That's right.
2008 of over 10%, over 11% in 2009, over 13% in 2010. Kind of bounced back a little. It was almost 3% in 2011, down and still, but then almost 15% in 2012. So I mean, we just went through a period there where, you know, the basically the increment above the base year was going down instead of going up as was anticipated. So that's what got everything upside down. You know, and of course it hurt the city across the board. We were losing tax base in all the other areas of the city at the same time, and only managed to avoid being in the same situation in the Harbor CRA because those projects were starting later, saw it coming, and actually paid some of the grant money back before they got upside down.
Are there any opportunities to annex other properties into the CRA? Like, for instance, this connector road, I mean, do we make that a condition that, hey, this area's got to join us since they're connected to our CRA?
The challenge would be that the boundaries of the CRA were identified with the creation of the CRA. And you can amend the CRA to expand the boundaries, but I think you would be faced with a challenge from the county to identify to say that to develop the findings of necessity and identify conditions of blight, to add that area and not have opposition from the county.
And you have to secure the approval of all the taxing agencies that are in the area. And it's, and the statute's also changed. So, basically, when the town center CRA was originally enacted, it was fairly simple, and counties didn't have as an opportunity, if you will, to challenge it. Now, like in 2000 or so, there's, because of a lot of pushback from counties against the creation of CRAs, they changed the statutes, and it allowed more of an opportunity, especially for charter counties to basically appeal and push back against that creation of the CRAs. That's one of the reasons that the county did push back against creation of the Harbor CRA and negotiated through an interlocal agreement a lesser TIF sharing, instead of being 100% of the TIF, which is enjoyed by the town center CRA. It's not even a 50% TIF. It's
Right.
basically equal to what the city sees in an increase in the TIF. So that's a fairly significant change. Now, the reality is that, as I discovered the last time we started making changes to the CRAs, non-charter counties aren't treated the same, and we could have, probably the city of Destin probably could have prevailed in a suit against the county over that challenge. However, I think the powers that be at that time thought it would probably be wise not to challenge the county, rather to settle agreeably and created the interlocal agreement that set that TIF out. But today, if you go try to change the boundaries, you pretty much need to have the acquiescence of the taxing entity, which in this case is the county.
Yeah, when, I think before I left the council this last time, I'd asked you to check with the property appraiser to make sure all properties were properly identified within the CRA, to make sure we were getting the revenue we were supposed to. Well, when it was first started, it wasn't. There was lots of property that was not included in the original CRA that was supposed to be. And the county owed us a bunch of money for that. We never got it, that's history. But
Why isn't it?
that was something that
Let's make it.
if we don't watch it, nobody else will.
That's correct.
Well, Mr. Schmidt, I know in the last couple of years, what you've done is you've taken a look at the tax roll and the incremental increase and compared it to other increases in other portions of the city, and just looking at analysis, have even challenged the property appraiser. Have we taken a look, have you been able to keep up with that with your?
I've had a little difficulty keeping up with that. I did manage to kind of catch up a year ago to get the last 2 or 3 years up, and even was able to go back a couple of years and compare it. That those increases over a couple of years of tax appraisers numbers. I will tell you, the last time I looked at it, there were still some fairly significant discrepancies. You can contribute that basically to the tax appraiser that we had at the time, but after we got a new tax appraiser, it didn't appear from my last check to be changing significantly. This year is the first time that we've seen an increase of over 7% since 2006. And that number for the town center actually was higher than the city as a whole. So this is the first time since I was running those reports that we've seen that the town center valuations had increased more than the city as a whole. And actually, it still is substantially over the harbor CRA, which is still a little head scratching, but this year it does appear, and I haven't run the numbers from this last year yet, like I have in the past on the other, for the other years, but I suspect based on what we're seeing in the annual growth of the tax rate that was put out by the tax appraiser this year, it appears that this year won't be as onerous as it has in years past.
And just to make a clarification, the assessed value of the property is established by the property appraiser, and then the tax assessor does the calculation on what the tax increment is.
Yes, that's correct. The just value and the tax appraiser's estimate of just value is supposed to be synonymous with fair market value. That's where we've seen some of the discrepancies in those reports, and that you'll see a piece of property that's a qualified sale, arguably between a willing buyer and a willing seller, that sells for a lot more than what the tax appraiser subsequently sets the just value of. And that's
The increase that you just talked about for 2018, actually that property increased in value in what, 2017?
Yes, we're seeing the number is.
So it didn't hit the tax rolls in
We get it in arrears, that's correct.
2018. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, that is correct.
The good news is when the economy is going down is it takes us a year to feel it. The bad news is when it's going up, it takes us a year to feel it too, so.
Well, I guess the good news is that what you're saying is it went up 7%, which is higher than the general increase for the city. So it appears that they made up a little bit of the lag that we had been seeing in the incremental increase in values through the district.
Yeah.
But you're stating that there are still some discrepancies.
And I haven't done last year's analysis yet, but from the years before, there were still some discrepancies. In some cases, some real head scratchers, but.
Well, if you get time, it would be good to know, and we appreciate that review, because I think if we're not minding the store, the county is not going to give us
That's exactly it.
the value. They will not value the property in our favor.
Well, we're kind of hamstrung because of the Save Our Homes legislation, the Save Our, and the subsequent amendment, constitutional amendment that limits non-homesteaded property, commercial property to a maximum of 10% increase a year. So if you don't catch up when it sells, then you may never catch up.
Well, sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot.
Everybody likes lower taxes.
So, Mr. Foreman, I think your point is you'd like to see maybe some contributed funding from the city to help us achieve some projects. We've seen some, I think in this last year's budget, there was some Parks and Rec dollars to assist with some of the tree planting. We've seen some general fund dollars spent. I guess the DOT did the study on the curve, but looking at that, has the city identified a capital project for that to do the improvements to the to that?
We're actually, I think, getting a grant for it, so looks like it may still be a year off, but we're getting some grant money through the state to do those improvements. The city is basically, you know, we're working on the banner program on Main Street, and in fact, I understand that the engineering for the foundations for those banner poles should be just about done. So that's ongoing, and that's coming out of basically city funds. We've got some other improvements that will probably be done. We've got more interest in buying some of the vacant land just north of the Winn-Dixie, and also fronting on 98 around Big Kahunas, which gives us an opportunity to acquire some right-of-way for the extension of 98 Palms, and Matty Kelly down to 98, the Palms Boulevard up to the extended 98 Palms. There's gonna, you know, once we get the right-of-way, and there will be some construction associated with those developments that occur in that right-of-way, but there's gonna be a fairly significant amount of work that would still need to be funded by the city, and that's probably, that will probably be out of city funds unless we can secure additional grants from DOT or, you know, somebody to get
Are
those.
there impact funds that conceivably could help out?
There's, you know, we can use gas tax funds and that sort of thing. So all this goes into a pot, and you allocate how it's going to. You know the routine. You've seen that. You've done it. So
Yes.
that all goes into a pot, and you figure out how you're going to spend it each year in your budget.
Well, I think the idea here is that if we don't ask the council for some of these things, if we don't bring it up, they won't be brought up. And so what I'm talking about when I'm talking here is throwing some ideas out that maybe we can, we're gonna do I guess a report of some sort at some point in time. Maybe we can, I think there are a lot of good things that have been done in the town center over the period of years, aside from the roads and things like that. But definitely there's some good things to be done, and I think it ought to be brought to the attention of the council that these things are ongoing and are showing that this plan is being implemented.
I've got some just questions, comments too, and I'm definitely not a financer person or budget person. Look at my own finances to see that probably. But my question is there any way, I mean, I know we're paying back the city, I understand that. Is there any way to have an agreement with the city, from the CRA even, to maybe 5% of what we're paying y'all back every year we can withhold to do something like put some park benches out or put some banners out or something that people visibly can see? Because all we're seeing, we're sitting here year after year looking at this going, okay, well, we're going to review this again next year. I'm discouraged. I've been here doing this a long time. I know Lockwood has. And you know, maybe time gets extended out when the city gets paid back theirs before we see it on this chart. Maybe it's a year or two, but a percentage, something, some funds that we can go do something. Because all I'm seeing is car dealerships and blight still, more blight probably than a couple of years ago in some cases. It is great with the trees and all that, but if it wasn't for Main Street Betterment Alliance, you know, stepping out there and trying to get some things done through the council, that wouldn't have ever been done. We really wouldn't have any. And I'm discouraged. So my question is that possible even to?
That's an argument that'll probably carry more weight in 2021 when there actually is some increment above the debt service.
Okay.
And so that's when it's going to any increment, you know, and our finance director may be looking at the entire amount of, and I think this pro forma reflects, he's saying, okay, well, here's the increment above the debt service, and all of that's going to go into paying back the shortfall to the city general fund. Mm-hmm. You know, when the incremental income still doesn't pay the debt service, that's gonna be a hard argument to make and get city council to agree to. But when now you have basically a difference between the a positive difference between the incremental income and the debt service, now you can start to probably say, well, we'd like to take 5% of that or some portion of that out and allocate it to some improvement projects rather than just paying the general fund back, 100% of all the revenues until it's zeroed out. So that's just my perspective on it. I mean, obviously anything that you can propose anything, and if council approves it, then that's what's going to happen. But I think your argument would probably go a little further if there were some positive incremental funding between the income and the debt service to work with. Now you can take, in effect, ask for a percentage of positive cash flow rather than asking to increase the negative cash flow.
But in the meantime, we're getting funds coming in, through, BP thing, I don't even know the name, terms and all. Cities benefiting from a lot of things, if they're able to use outside the CRA. And so y'all are able to do stuff, and we're not getting any of those funds. So.
The substantial portion of our major improvements are solely from grant funding. We really, we have a 1.615 millage rate. It's probably one of the lowest in the state, certainly for coastal cities, and we're capped at 2%. When you look at the budget, it's pretty tight, and the majority of major projects are funded. We've done a great job in the last few years of getting grant money. And that's what's funded a lot of these major projects. We had, a grant for $3.6 million that did a lot of stormwater improvements. We had a grant for, over $10 million that's still improving Noriega Point. We're working on a grant now to totally redo the Joe's Bayou recreation area. We've got a lot of grant. We get some grant money to do possibly the curve on Airport Road. Have done a great job of getting grants, and it's a darn good thing, because if we hadn't, we'd have very little to show for the last several years in terms of project improvements.
One of the things that we may want to include in our work plan going forward in 2018 is make a request to City Council for funding for some of the landscape improvements, for example. You may want to just ask them for.
And that's doable. I mean, that's basically, we've got funding in the budget. It's their choice how to allocate it. So, there's nothing wrong with this committee throwing the hat in and saying, here's a project we'd like to see happen. Can you include that in the budget?
So, yes, it would be better in 2021 when the revenue stream is positive, but in the meantime, we can, if we can identify some specific projects, and when we prepare our work plan, when we present it, we can ask them to fund it.
Well, even if some of these projects, if you think of them now, then next year you might put it on a piece of paper, and the following year you might have some phasing in of it. What I'm saying is that just sufficient funds to hire somebody to do the study or the design work or those kinds of things would be a start. It would at least look like we're making the project work for us. So I think even just to get someone to do the design work or the planning ahead like that, you got to do that anyway. If you're going to after a grant, you got to have all that done anyway. So I think it would be good if we had some of that, but I can't see us talking about this for 3 more years.
Yeah.
It just defies logic.
Well, it's, you know, I think in 2 to 3 years, you probably just need to identify projects that are dear to you, that you think you might be able to get the funding out of the general fund, out of the grouping of the general fund and other income from gas taxes and that sort of thing.
Well, if you're growing at the rate of 7% in 2018, and like she said, if you ask for 2% as an advance on your funding for 2021.
Yeah, now's the time to ask for it, don't wait till 2021, and it happened 2 years after that. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe if the sales tax passes, maybe we can get some of that money.
Well, I think that's projected to be almost $1 million for the city.
Well, maybe we should look at our plan, it's just a suggestion, we've been looking at it, but let's make a priority list of what we'd like to see. Do the low pick fruit first, maybe it's just something so simple as, you know, the benches and trash cans on Main Street and Airport. That can't be that much cost in that as opposed to a gateway sign. And, you know, maybe they'll give us a little bit of money for that in next year's budget, then they'll give us a little bit more the next year because they've seen an improvement. But
Well,
if
Ms.
you don't
Sapp,
see any improvements, you're not gonna, who wants to give money?
I think you've identified some good, some reachable low-hanging fruit, as you said. And so on page 12 of the plan, we've identified some items. There's streetscape elements, and so funding some of those. Also in here, you have, it talks about the linear park. Maybe we ask for funding to design the linear park, as Mr. Foreman had suggested to do, get the design now so that when 2021 comes around, we may have funding to do the actual construction.
Where is Gulf Power on their contract? They've already settled on that?
No, they have not. They're still.
Have not.
No.
Because that was one of the items, they said they was just
If there's been a counter offer made back to them, I'm not sure what it really is.
So what I might suggest is, I don't know if we're prepared to make some recommendations this evening, but maybe we make some recommendations at the next meeting and look at it, including some of these items in the work plan, because we should probably be considering the work plan at the next meeting. And then when we present that in sometime after that, October to December is usually the time frame. We presented our work plans, depending on the schedule of the CRA's schedule. We can ask for some funding for some of these projects. So homework, I would recommend that we go home and look through some of, this is in the selected plan, starting on page 11, and it identifies different projects and things to do, and see if we can pick out some of the lesser expensive items. We can identify some things possibly for design or some small improvements such as street furniture. And then we can get some of that, maybe secure some funding from the general fund to do some of those projects. And we can include those requests within the work plan the 2019 work plan that we will present to the CRA, which is the city council. So our next meeting your assignment, should you choose to accept it. And I don't think it'll self-destruct. Will be on the 19th of September. Do we have any other comments or discussions or amendments that anybody would like to recommend to the plan as it's currently presented, as it's currently before us?
Well, by us going and looking at this again carefully, just that section, we may come back with some other ideas we didn't think of before. I'm thinking next meeting.
Let me ask this question of Mr. Schmidt. Part of the challenge with getting things moving in the CRA is the downtown Destin shopping center. And it is blighted, and it is, I think the Winn-Dixie has become, or it's close to becoming, a nuisance structure. Would the city consider proceeding with condemnation?
You mean like a building inspection condemnation or an eminent domain acquisition?
Well, there's,
No.
we're bleeding, there's no way to do an eminent domain acquisition, but I think there is a building condemnation that might force the property owner to move forward. I mean, we've gotten lots of promises, and I'll think about it, and maybe, and what's your ideas, and what do you have in the plan, and what could we do to make that happen on our property, and how would it benefit us, and we've had no action.
They've got,
That is I understand that is outside of the scope of action that the city likes to take. But should we be the voice prodding that to help the project move forward? Mr. Foreman?
yeah, I've had at least two of the owners, two of the businesses there that approached me some months ago and said that they've got significant problems with rodents, with water damage, with just generally hazards in that section of it in the middle. And all, and one of them was the owner of the business that has the patio furniture. And they were pretty upset over it, and they said that something needs to be done to force the owner to do something about it. The roof has fallen in. None of the systems work. They've probably got electrical problems there. I think it'd be a great inspection.
Well, I have once again, I have a more direct connection to the building inspector than I did, so I will certainly have an opportunity to ask her these questions in the near future. I'll get back with you next month.
And the owner there charges the businesses around there for parking. I'm not sure if that's legal or not, but they're charging Callahan's for parking in their parking lot. And of course, they don't have any control over it, so. Anyway, that's the kind of thing I think it's keeping businesses away.
Every time we get somebody interested that expresses an interest in buying it, we promptly forward the owner's information to them. So hopefully, at some point, they'll get a little bit more motivated.
Well, and I think if you have condemnation pending, that may be a motivating factor. Can be a
For me.
motivating factor.
I owned it.
Well, if there's no other recommendations, I encourage you to read through the CRA plan again, in addition to looking for projects that we may want to include in our work plans to present to the city council. We will entertain any other amendments to the documents at our next meeting. And then I think we need to, we will have reached the point where we need to say, here's the plan. So I'd like to finalize the additions and deletions to the plan at our next meeting, which is September 19th. So that brings us to new business. We have no new business on the agenda. I've not heard anyone recommend to bring any up. So that would lead us to committee member comments. Ms. Sanstead, do you have any comments this evening you'd like to add?
Mr. Schmidt, you had mentioned the banner arms, that's in progress. I just have a question, have they been engineered?
The foundation is being engineered with a structural engineer, and Dave Campbell's handling that. I did hear him say late last week that it should be about done. So that's probably the biggest engineering hurdle. And after that, it's just a matter of, and I suspect that the structural engineer is also recommending, some mass arm manufacturer. So at that point, it's just a matter of getting the plans and getting it scheduled for construction.
The reason I'm asking is because, and he's not here to speak for him, but just today, my husband received an email from Lance Johnson saying that he was still in the engineering process. Nothing has been ordered, but yet he'd been told that 4 arms, months ago, 4 arms have already been ordered. We couldn't get 8, 4 had been ordered. So there's a disconnect between Lance and
What
Ben
had been
Campbell.
ordered?
That they're still in the engineering process. But nothing has been ordered, no banner arms have been ordered, but he was told by Dave Campbell that 4 were ordered several months ago. So now that's why I'm asking. There's a disconnect between what Dave Campbell's saying and Lance Johnson is saying right now. So, I just kind of like to know where we stand on that. For my husband's sake more than anything, because he's the one that's arranging for the artist and stuff to get these ready.
I'll ask.
It's been 1.5 years long since it's been approved by the city council to move forward, so that's my only comments, which is not CRA related, sort of. Well, it is in the CRA, so it is related. That's it.
All right, Ms. Morrell?
Yes, I went to the high school meeting. They don't need any help yet because they're getting the foundation, they're getting the IRS, and they're getting all the work together. They were going to change the name of the Destin High School Foundation, and I recommended not to, because why change it? If you go change it to something different, people are not going to know that it's a Destin High School. They also, I was not too pleased, but they're going to go charter. And I mentioned something about the land and some of the land that you had mentioned. Mm-hmm. And they said at this time they're still getting the foundations together. So I'll keep up with that anyway. I noticed that you talked about the Dollar General being grandfathered in. But where is it grandfathered in that says you could leave junk or garbage sitting there like on Main Street? I mean, I go by there a lot, and they've got these wire things there, and they got garbage thrown in, and you could see it right from Main Street. Where in when they...
Well, the grandfathering is there are provisions in the code now that prevent that open back and they have to screen when they have, the carts, the merchandise carts.
Okay, well, it's not screened, it's just right out there.
I understand that. It's not screened because they are grandfathered in and they are not required to have a screening.
Okay, okay. So
But
they're
as
not-
far as the trash,
Yeah,
what
the
ends up
trash.
happening, you know, there's no law that says they can have trash, but
Right.
you see trash, you call code enforcement goes out and cites them, and then it typically gets cleaned up.
So they're
It's-
grandfathered in and they can do whatever they want in the back of that land there because they're grandfathered in it. Even if it's unsightly to, you know, Main Street, it's unsightly to the whole town, and they're able to do that? I just didn't think that meant grandfathered in.
Until you give a citation authority to code enforcement so they can issue it on the spot,
Mhm.
you have to do a citation, and then they have a opportunity to comply, and then if they don't, then they come before the special magistrate. So there's a process for code enforcement, and typically what happens with these serial offenders is that they understand how much time they have. Now, the city has shortened that time dramatically, and they have taken the neighbor goodwill judgment out of it by going to special magistrate, so that it moves a lot quicker than what it used to, but, I mean, until you give tools to code enforcement to allow them to say, you got a trash problem, here's the ticket, pay it now, go on, you're not going to, you're going to have people like Dollar General who are running their merchandise in and out, and they don't have to screen it, and they have no compelling reason to build that screen, so it's going to be in the open.
So here we are decorating Airport Road, Main Street, and then you got the trash sitting over there. I just saw it today sitting there in the bin, all trash that they just threw in, and I can't see that being in a grandfathered in. Also, there's the industrial park, Industrial Park Lane, especially there's a J on the building there. What were those? Were they just storage units at one time and now they're made into businesses? Because there's a few places on there that they're not even behind a closed door. All the junk is sitting right outside. I went looking there Sunday. I went for a ride, taking a ride around the town there. It's Industrial Park Lane, and it's the J that's on that building. If you look, you go around there and you'll see that they're just literally having all whatever they're doing right out on the sidewalk, right out in the area. I just wanted to mention that. I saw that.
What is it that's out around?
Pardon me?
What is it that you're saying is out?
Well,
Like trash?
I think it's a business, the business, and
Business.
they're doing, I guess, I don't know, lawnmowers and things like that. And instead of it having the building all closed, it's, all the stuff is outside of it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
And
So are you coming off of Main Street, turning on Industrial Park Lane, and then turning right on?
Airport, you go to Main Street, Airport Road, and you take a right, Industrial Lane, Industrial Park Lane. And
And
the
it
building
curves
there is the
around.
J, that was the one. There was a lot of stuff around, a big garbage thing that was all filled up. But there was a couple of businesses that were not enclosed at all, and it was a Sunday, so it should have been behind closed doors or whatever, but it's a dump. I mean, it was just a bunch of stuff. I guess the working stuff that they use or whatever, I don't really know. It's just a mess, and it is in our area. And I just wanted to make one other comment about the core value of the month, respect. I feel that, respect for others simply by agreeing to disagree. The world is so full of hate, and everybody can't get over the fact that everybody don't think alike. So I think that was terrific with the respect, because we should respect others. Even if they don't think like we think, at least listen, just agree to disagree, and go on. And that's about it. But I was very upset with grandfathering into the, Dollar General. I just couldn't get over that. We're doing everything to make it look nice, and then we got that sitting there. So, and that's right in the same area that we're talking about with the Winn-Dixie out that way.
And that is, you know, and that's the frustration that we have
We only have
felt
one Main
as a-
Street, you know.
as a committee, and Ms. Sandsted has championed that in the past, and unfortunately, they are not required, the grandfathering is they're not required to provide screening.
Okay, but what can we make them be required to do to keep their trash out, besides just cleaning it up? Shouldn't they be able to, since we're doing everything to make Main Street, to try to make Main Street look nice like Main Street, and tourists attracted to it, and all this, and then we got the junk over there. I mean, shouldn't they have to do something? I don't, you know,
Well, we
we're
have
having.
one of our, I don't have the work plans with me, but one of the work plans is talking about property, conditions of blight, and conditions of property. So maybe the recommendation is to give citation authority to code enforcement
Right.
so they can
I've got some work plans.
cite immediately.
Right, I mean, if there's nothing grandfathered done in to keep it a mess and to keep it look sloppy. I mean, if we're changing things on Main Street, then I think they should have to change things too to make it look good. I don't see why Destin's Village should allow it. They should have some restrictions on them to keep it nice. We're putting this money out to make it nice, and then we got that sitting there. Just like that industrial Park Lane there with that, you know, all those, I don't know what they were. I don't know if they were storage units, I don't know what they were at one time, but just a whole bunch of businesses, and some are closed and nice, and, you know, they keep it clean, but, you know, they don't even, they have everything sitting out, they don't have it inside any place. I think on Sunday, you know, I went on a Sunday to see, maybe that they move it all in on Sunday, no. It's all just junk sitting there. And then there was this garbage, big garbage dump that was just piled so high, everything's coming out of it, so I'm sure that people are just going around putting their garbage in there rather than putting it in their own garbage pail. You know, some don't have the garbage, so they figure, oh, well, we know where this dumpster is, let's go put it in. And that's our area too, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it's just not, you know, and that's about it for me. Like I said, that's a nice goal. They don't know, when I mentioned to them if they needed anything from us, and they said at this time they're trying to put the foundation of it all together. They're filling out IRS papers, and they're getting, there's a meeting tomorrow that's online. They're gonna talk about doing that, and once it's done, I did recommend that the places that you spoke of, you know, about the school.
Mhm.
That was not their concern at the time yet, because they have to get a little further on it before they go to where it'll be. And I'll keep in touch with them. And that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Mr. Foreman?
Yeah, what she's talking about goes to the issue of our relationship with the owner of the shopping center, as well as the management group that manages it out of, I believe it's Mobile or somewhere.
Yes.
And all, and I don't know whether it would work to recommend to the council to send them a letter and summarize some of these things that are distasteful to the city. Probably not, but having nothing to do with grandfathering, it's the relationship of the city to the people who own it. And there are businesses in there, and the businesses, if you go inside a Dollar General, it's worse than the back.
Well, I don't care what's inside of it though, I mean, what is outside is what we all
I
see.
believe,
And they should be respectful, and they should take care of it and make it look nice for us.
I understand.
Mr. Schmidt, I think you could confirm, didn't Mr. Former City Manager Casella write several of those letters?
Yes, we actually had meetings with the owner.
We publish their contact information for the citizens to call.
Nice trees and
I don't want any.
the trash.
I apologize.
That's all. No more.
Mr. Woodard? And I don't have anything else to add at this time. We've now come to recognition of visitors. Do we have any visitors that would like to come to the podium? Then we stand adjourned.